On the morning of July 8, 1977, 134 FBI agents fanned out across 2 American cities. They moved on a Hollywood building first, then a Los Angeles complex, then a Washington, D.C. office tower a few blocks from the White House. They carried sledgehammers, they carried bolt cutters, they had warrants for the largest single operation against an American religious organization in FBI history. By the end of the day, they would seize 48,000 documents. Inside those documents was the largest infiltration of the United States government ever conducted by anyone in any era, and it had been planned by a woman most Americans had never heard of. Her name was Mary Sue Hubbard. She was 46 years old. She lived in a quiet apartment in Los Angeles with her husband. She had 4 children. She wore conservative clothes. She drove an unremarkable car. She also held a title inside the Church of Scientology that did not appear on any government document. She was the controller. She ran an intelligence agency that by 1977 had operatives inside the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Justice, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the American Medical Association, the Coast Guard, and 130 other agencies. None of them knew she existed. To understand how she got there, you have to understand what her husband had built. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer who, in 1950, published a book called Dianetics. Within 4 years, the book had become a religion. Within 10, the religion had its own celebrity adherents, its own buildings, its own doctrines. By the 1960s, it also had a problem. The United States government did not consider Scientology a religion. The IRS had revoked its tax-exempt status. The FDA had raided its headquarters. The American Medical Association had labeled it dangerous. Foreign governments were beginning to follow. Hubbard came to a decision in 1966. The church could not survive if its files inside government agencies remained accessible to investigators. Every claim against the church, every audit, every adverse report sat in cabinets the church could not reach, so Hubbard created an organization to reach them. He called it the Guardian's Office. He made his wife its head. Her brief was simple: find every government file on Scientology, read it, remove it, replace it with something more favorable. Mary Sue Hubbard had no intelligence background. She had a year to plan it. She gave it a name: Operation Snow White. The first problem was personnel. Mary Sue could not infiltrate federal agencies herself. She needed Scientologists who would pass an FBI background check, sit at a government desk for years, and steal documents without ever being suspected. She needed her people to look like the most ordinary Americans alive. She started small. In 1973, a young Scientologist named Gerald Bennett Wolfe applied for a clerk-typist position at the Internal Revenue Service in Washington, D.C. He was hired. His government identification number was J2811. Inside the church, his code name was Silver. He was the first. Wolfe's job was to walk into the IRS building every morning, do his work, and after hours, photocopy any document that mentioned Scientology. He passed those documents to a handler. The handler passed them to Mary Sue. Within months, the church knew exactly which IRS agents were investigating it, what they had found, and what they planned to do. The agents themselves had no idea their files were being read. Wolfe was promoted. He gained access to higher classifications. He started copying not just files about Scientology, but files about the IRS itself, documents the church could use to threaten any agent who got too close. Mary Sue saw what Wolfe had achieved and accelerated. By 1975, she had operatives inside the Department of Justice in Washington, inside the Coast Guard's Office of Intelligence, inside the offices of 2 United States attorneys, inside the American Medical Association's headquarters in Chicago, inside the Better Business Bureau, inside the offices of newspapers that had written critical articles about Scientology, including the Washington Post and the St. Petersburg Times. The operation had a budget. It had a chain of command. It had its own internal jargon. The Guardian's Office was no longer a few clerks. It was the largest non-governmental intelligence organization operating on American soil. Inside the church, Mary Sue called these operatives Snow White program assets. She gave them code names. She paid for their apartments. She gave them photographic equipment and false ID cards. She trained them on how to behave under interrogation, how to spot surveillance, how to leave a building if they suspected they had been compromised. The training was good. By 1976, Operation Snow White had successfully infiltrated more federal agencies than the Soviet Union had managed during the entire Cold War. They had not been detected. They had not been suspected. They had not made a single significant mistake. And then Gerald Wolfe made one. The mistake was small. In May 1976, Wolfe wanted access to a section of the IRS building he had no clearance for. He decided the simplest way in was to make himself a fake IRS identification card under another agent's name. He took the card to the building one evening. The card got him through the first checkpoint. It got him through the second. At the third, a security guard looked at it and noticed something. The signature did not match the agent it claimed to be. The guard called another guard. Wolfe was detained. He gave a false name. The FBI was contacted. Inside the Guardian's office, the moment Wolfe was detained, alarms went off. Mary Sue had drilled her operatives on what to do if compromised. Wolfe followed protocol. He gave the FBI nothing. He claimed he had been entering the building for a personal reason. He was charged with possessing forged government identification, a relatively minor offense. He was released on bail. He went home. The Guardian's office assumed they had survived. Mary Sue ordered Operation Snow White to slow down. She ordered Wolfe pulled out of the IRS quietly. The FBI, she believed, would investigate the forgery and find nothing else. She was wrong. A young FBI agent named Christine Hansen had taken Wolfe's case. She was supposed to file the paperwork and move on, but something about the file bothered her. Wolfe's apartment, when searched, had contained a key with no marking on it. Hansen wanted to know what the key opened. She traced it. It opened a storage locker at a rental facility in suburban Virginia. Hansen got a warrant. Inside the locker were photocopies of internal IRS documents Wolfe had no business possessing. Among them was a single typewritten page. It listed code names: Snow White, Italics, China Shop. Hansen had no idea what any of it meant, but she knew it was bigger than a forged ID. The FBI opened a quiet investigation. They watched Wolfe. They watched the people Wolfe met. They watched the buildings Wolfe entered. Within months, they had identified a network of Scientologists moving documents across Washington. Surveillance photographs, telephone wiretaps, postal intercepts. The investigation grew. By spring 1977, the FBI had built a case file 2 feet thick. They had identified Mary Sue Hubbard as the operations controller. They had mapped the Guardian's office's command structure. They knew about the Hollywood building. They knew about the Los Angeles complex. They knew about the Washington office. They had warrants signed and ready. At 6:53 a.m. on July 8, 1977, the warrants went live. 134 FBI agents moved simultaneously on the 3 locations. Inside the Hollywood building, agents broke through a reinforced door and found a corridor of filing cabinets. Inside Los Angeles, agents found a vault. Inside Washington, agents found rooms full of stolen government documents stacked floor to ceiling. The Guardian's office had not had time to destroy anything. Mary Sue Hubbard was in Los Angeles when the raid happened. She watched agents carry her files out of the building in cardboard boxes. She did not resist. She did not speak. She watched. The 48,000 documents the FBI seized that day are still considered, by the Bureau itself, one of the most significant intelligence hauls in its domestic history. They contained internal church memoranda. They contained operation plans. They contained the names of every Snow White operative across the federal government. They contained surveillance reports the church had compiled on its critics, including journalists, judges, and government employees. And they contained something the church had never expected the FBI to find: a second operation, run in parallel to Snow White, designed to destroy a single individual. Her name was Paulette Cooper. She was a journalist. In 1971, she had published a book called The Scandal of Scientology. The church had decided she could not be allowed to keep writing. They had assigned her a code name, Operation Freakout. The plan, written down inside the seized files, was to either drive Cooper to suicide, get her institutionalized or have her imprisoned. The Guardian's office had been forging bomb threats in Cooper's name and sending them to government offices. Cooper had spent 5 years under federal indictment, facing 15 years in prison for crimes the church had committed in her name. She had been close to suicide. She had no idea why. The Cooper file in the FBI's evidence boxes was what changed the case from a federal infiltration prosecution into something larger. The Justice Department now had documentary evidence that the Guardian's office had attempted to destroy a private American citizen. That detail moved the case to the front of the federal docket. Mary Sue Hubbard and 10 other senior Scientologists were indicted on August 15, 1978. The charges included conspiracy, theft of government property, burglary, obstruction of justice, false statements, and wiretapping. The trial would expose the entire structure of the Guardian's office to the American public for the first time. The trial never happened. The defendants entered into a stipulation of evidence in October 1979, agreeing the FBI's seized documents could be entered into the record without challenge. They were betting on a lighter sentence. The judge who reviewed the documents, Charles Ritchie, did not give them one. In his sentencing memorandum, he wrote that the crimes committed by these defendants represented one of the most outrageous attacks on American institutions ever conducted by a private organization. Mary Sue Hubbard was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Her 10 co-defendants received sentences ranging from 1 to 5 years. L. Ron Hubbard, the man who had created Operation Snow White, was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the FBI's filing. He was never charged. By the time the indictments came down, he had disappeared from public life. He spent the last 6 years of his life on a ranch in California, in seclusion, writing science fiction novels. He died in 1986. His wife, Mary Sue, served less than 5 years in federal prison. When she was released, the Church of Scientology, the institution she had spent her life protecting, refused to readmit her. She lived the rest of her life quietly in Los Angeles. She died in 2002. The Guardian's office was officially dissolved in 1981. The Church of Scientology issued statements distancing itself from the operation, blaming Mary Sue and her team as a rogue faction. Internally, the church reorganized the same intelligence functions under a new department, the Office of Special Affairs, which is still active today. The 48,000 documents the FBI seized in 1977 sat in a federal archive for 40 years. Most have never been declassified. Researchers and journalists who have requested access have been denied on grounds that the files contain ongoing sources and methods, even though the operation is officially over. There are 3 ways to read what Operation Snow White actually was. The first reading, held by the FBI and the Department of Justice, is that it was a criminal conspiracy by a small group of fanatics who exceeded the authority of their religion and were brought to justice. The second reading, held by the Church of Scientology, is that Mary Sue Hubbard and her associates acted alone, that the church itself was not responsible, and that the operation has no bearing on the modern institution. The third reading is what the seized documents actually show. They show a fully integrated intelligence organization, planned at the highest level of the church, funded from central church coffers, executed by hundreds of operatives over more than a decade, targeting the United States government and any private American who criticized the church. The documents show that Mary Sue did not act alone. The documents show that L. Ron Hubbard ordered the operation in writing. The documents show that the Office of Special Affairs has continued the operation's functions under a different name. Operation Snow White is the largest documented infiltration of the United States government by any non-state actor in American history. It was conducted not by a foreign power, not by a terrorist organization, not by organized crime. It was conducted by a religion incorporated in California, with a tax-exempt status the IRS restored in 1993, after 13 years of legal pressure from the church that included over 2,000 lawsuits filed against the agency and individual auditors. The lawsuit stopped when the IRS agreed. The Church of Scientology has been tax-exempt in the United States ever since. This file remains sealed. The Office of Special Affairs is still operating. Subscribe and you'll be there when the next one opens.